2025. Oh, that screech felt like a seagull. Hi, welcome to 2025 Book Buddies. This video should have went up at the end of the year. It didn't. I really slacked on this channel come, honestly, the last half of last year. Sorry about that. But I'm back. I'm here. I'm ready to share more book stuff. I'm ready to read. And this is actually coming a bit into January as well because I have been so sick. So horribly sick. And not just I've been sick, my wife's been sick, and our two toddlers have been sick. It has been a horrible time all around. You can probably still hear a little bit of sickness. This video is going to be kind of a two-parter. I read a lot in 2024. I'm going to share my 24 favorite books I read in 2024 with you. I'm going to give a tiny little preface to this, and that is reading is subjective. I might absolutely love a book and you might absolutely hate it, and that is perfectly okay. Everyone has different thoughts and feelings about literature, and that's like a wonderful thing. I love hearing other people's thoughts on books. I love reading when I'm finished a book. On Goodreads, I don't know why that's my place of choice, but I go to Goodreads, I give my rating, and then I like to look at other people's reviews and see what other people thought of what I read. It's kind of fun. I really need to join a book club, I know, because I would love to sit and yap and like craft and chat about a good book. That sounds amazing. So if anyone wants to start a book club in 2025 and lives in Nova Scotia, hit me up. Not even joking. So let's start with the 24 books, but after that we are going to go into my reading stats for the year. I made a little reading wrap up for you guys and a fun little PowerPoint that I'm not sure you're going to actually be able to see. Coming in at 24 is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I don't know what it is about this book. I know I read it in April of last year, but it feels like I read it a lifetime ago. This, though, was such a cozy fantasy for me. We have a little bit of rivals to lovers, but the romance in this book is not spicy, it's not steamy, and it's also not really, I don't know, not that prevalent. It's a little bit more of like on the back burner, I would say. I wouldn't categorize this as a romantasy book. It's definitely a fantasy book. And we are following Miss Emily Wilde, who is a professor at, I believe, Cambridge. She studies fairies, and this is in kind of an alternate universe. It's the early 1900s where fairies are real. She is on the hunt to make an encyclopedia of all fairy types. She goes to this very isolated spot to get some of her last info she needs, meet some of those last kinds of fae. Something I really like about this book is how it's not just high fae like you would have in a Court of Thorns and Roses or Crescent City or any of those Sarah J Maas books, where they look like people, but they're more beautiful and they're stronger and they have magic and they're better than a person could ever be. These are more mystical and whimsical and fun, in my opinion. There are some high fae, but there's a lot more to this. So like I said, there's a little bit of a rivals to lovers story in this, and they're academic rivals, and I think maybe he thinks they're always friends and she is a little bit like crotchety, grouchy, grumpy, and he's a little bit more of like a golden retriever. So I liked this. I gave it 4 stars, and it comes in at number 24. Number 23 is another 4-star read for me, and that is Anne of Green Gables. This is a children's literature classic. It's set in like late 1800s, early 1900s, I believe, written by Lucy Maud Montgomery, and takes place on Prince Edward Island. And it really romanticizes PEI and makes it to be this magical, beautiful place to live. Magic, not like fantasy magic, just beautiful. And we are following Anne, who is an orphan girl taken in by the Cuthberts, but they actually wanted a boy. She was not what they were expecting to pick up at the train station. They wanted someone to help on the farm. Instead, they got Anne. They keep her, and this is her story of misadventures and adventures, and it's very much a coming-of-age, growing-up story. I absolutely loved this, and I'm sad that I put this off for years. I'm from PEI. I should have read this, like, a decade ago, but here we are 2 decades ago, honestly, when I was a child. I loved this. It's coming in at number 23. Coming in at number 22 is Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. This is a summertime romance, and it's kind of a missed connections romance. So at one point, Fern meets this boy, Will. They spend the most magical day together. They make a plan to meet a year later, and she shows up and he doesn't. Fast forward to the future, Fern's mother has passed away and she has taken over the resort in Muskoka that she grew up on. She did not want to live there. She did not want to have this life, but this is what she's doing now. And surprise, surprise, Mr. Will waltzes into her life and they kind of rekindle things. It's a fun book. I loved this. I love Carly Fortune's whole vibe. Something about reading these books in the summer is just like perfection for me. And as a Canadian who grew up in a resort style town, I love the setting of these books, all of them, honestly. But this one was great for me, so it's coming in at number 22. Number 21 is actually a parenting book. I'm not going to get into it as much because I feel like you guys might not be as interested in that. But this is called The Book You Wish Your Parents Read and Your Kids Will Be Glad You Did. I read this as an audiobook from the library. I just love parenting books because I want to be the best mom I can be, and I feel like there's a lot of learning to go along with being a good parent, especially when you have to unlearn a lot of behaviors and things and traumas from your own childhood and that I went through, and all of like the generational issues that I don't want to pass on to my own children. So this was a great read. If you're a parent, it was definitely a really, really good parenting book. I'm really happy I read this one. Coming in at number 20 is The Engagement Party. It is a thriller. It all takes place in one day. I like when thrillers are really quick paced, and this was for me. I absolutely devoured this thriller. There were so many twists and turns, and it kept me guessing and wanting to see what happened next, and I was so engrossed in it. The characters are super unlikable, but they're supposed to be. This book is about a group of friends who reconnect after many years, I think 12 years since their friend went missing and was later found dead. They're meeting up on this swanky private island to celebrate the engagement of one of their friends. But quickly we're seeing that things are not as they seem. There's some sinister intentions. They all get stuck on this island. There's a storm. They can't leave. So a little bit of like a locked room thriller aspect going on, and there's a killer amongst them, and we have to figure out what is happening while our characters are kind of getting picked off. This kept me guessing until the very end, so for that reason it's clocking in at number 20. At 19, we have Malice. This is a queer sapphic retelling of Sleeping Beauty. A little bit of a twist on this, though, is that it is told from the point of view of the evil sorceress. I really liked the magic in this book. I thought it was really interesting. It's not spicy. It's a bit of a romantasy, obviously, because it's a Sleeping Beauty retelling. I think it's really interesting that it's from the point of view of the villain, and I love this. Gave it 5 stars. Obviously, we're in 5-star territory now. I loved this book. It's a duology. I'm really excited to pick up the second one. Haven't done that yet. At number 18, we have She Gets the Girl. This is another sapphic romance. This is a YA romance, no spice. I read this in one sitting. I wasn't feeling good, sat down, and devoured this. In this, we have a really cool girl, Alex, and a nerdy girl, Molly. Alex decides that she wants to help Molly get the girl, Cora, that she has been lusting after, crushing on her entire time in school. This takes place as freshmen in college. I cried, I laughed, I loved this. Clocking in at number 18. Number 17, for everybody that loves to cry, we have 1,000 Boy Kisses. This is a YA book. It is absolutely tragic and heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, and I cried so much reading this. There's a lot of death. I feel like this book should have a lot of trigger warnings. I wanted a book to make me cry, and I full body sobbed for at least 90% of this book. We're following these two characters who are neighbors. They grow up best friends. They have this adorable little love, and then they have this adorable love, this bond. They think that they're going to be together forever, and then that's not what happens. He moves away and she stops talking to him. She cut him off without a word of explanation, and we are going to learn the why. At number 16, we have a super popular thriller that I read on Kindle Unlimited, The Housemaid's Secret. Everybody loves Frida McFadden, and I liked this. This girl has been down on her luck. She's been kicked around. She's homeless and she needs a job. She starts working for this affluent family and realizes that the wife is a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and is trying to get her fired. Very dark, very twisty. I did not see where this was going, and I loved that. At number 15, we have None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I love Lisa Jewell's thrillers, and this was not an exception to that. I gave this 5 stars. We follow some birthday twins in this. A famous podcaster who has her life totally together, is prim and perfect, and her birthday twin, a woman she meets at the bar one night, who is her kind of complete opposite. She's a completely average woman who's unhappy with her life, and they decide to have a podcast together, and then the secrets start spilling, and it turns out that neither of these women are what they seem. At number 14, we have another sapphic romance. This is Here for the Wrong Reasons. If you are a fan of The Bachelor, you need to read this. So if you've ever wondered what would happen if 2 contestants on The Bachelor fell for each other instead of the lead, that's what this story is. It is a little bit of a coming out journey, a little bit of finding yourself, so many Bachelor references, and again, a sapphic romance. I loved this. I thought it was such a fun read as someone that loves The Bachelor. And that's number 14. Number 13 is another sapphic book, and it is Her Spell That Binds Me. I read this also on Kindle Unlimited. It is a witchy standalone, which I love. I love when there's just one fantasy book, because honestly, I get roped into these like mega long series. This is just one book. Her Spell That Binds Me is a witchy sapphic romance taking place at a boarding school for witches, and we have an enemies to lovers trope in it. This is one of my favorite sapphic fantasies that I've read. I want to read so many more like romantic-y sapphic books like this. I wish that there was more. Maybe I'm gonna have to write one, because why is there not more? Can you guys write them? Please, let's just like all sit down. Let's write our little sapphic romances and we can just like exchange them. Please. There needs to be more of this out in the world. Number 12 is also a queer book, and that is The House on the Cerulean Sea. This is not sapphic, and the romance is definitely a subplot. This is a fantasy book. It is about an orphanage. There is a group of orphans that are all very magical and a little bit scary to society, and they've all been kind of sent away to this isolated little, looks like this isolated orphanage, for lack of a better word. And Linus is sent there to see if it's safe, to see if it's okay, because one of the children is the devil. Such a heartwarming, feel-good fantasy book. This was very cozy. There is a second book that's like a prequel to this that just came out, I think. Maybe it's the sequel, I don't know. This was great. I loved it. It just made me feel like so happy, and I love that in a fantasy. And the gay undertones added to that, honestly. Number 11 is a romantasy I read on Kindle Unlimited, and that is When the Moon Hatched. In this book, we have dragons, we have a badass female main character, and we have a golden retriever kind of sweetheart who will kind of do anything to protect the people he loves, male main character. And I don't know what it was about this book, but I just devoured it. I loved it. I think the dragons reminded me of dogs, and it was just I was here for the love. I don't want to spoil too much about this. I feel like everything I want to say is going to spoil it, but read this. Number 10 is on the same page. I also read this on Kindle Unlimited. It is a sapphic romance. I loved this. I honestly don't know why, but something about this made my brain so happy. I think it's that I don't read very many friends to lovers books, and this was one. Maybe that's a trope I like. My wife was not my friend first. She thought we were going to be friends. She thought that I was not going to end up being a lesbian. I am a lesbian. One of them is an influencer, which I also thought was kind of fun as a content creator. I don't know, something about this book I loved. Please just read it and tell me what you think. Number 9, I have a love-hate relationship with this book, and it is Kristen Hanna's The Women. I love historical fiction. I don't know why I don't read more of them. This is a historical fiction. It is about nurses who served in the Vietnam War and how their job as women was completely downplayed, how no one took them seriously, how as veterans, when they came back from the war after seeing horrible things, society said women weren't there. Only men go to war. There's lots of sexism. She is just such a great storyteller. I loved this story. It was heartbreaking, and I have a love-hate relationship with it because I think all books should have trigger warnings. I just think all books should. I don't know why books don't have trigger warnings. Maybe it's because people are worried that it's going to be a spoiler, but I'm going to give a spoiler. There is a miscarriage in this, and it was very traumatic for me to read as someone who has had 3 miscarriages, just to be thrown in there all of a sudden, and it was horrible. Because of that, I didn't like that. If I'd been warned about it, if I'd been mentally prepared to read that, I think this book would have ranked even higher. I love a good thought piece, and I love women. Fuck the patriarchy. Coming in at number 8, we have Emily Wilde's The Map of the Other Lands. This is the sequel to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I found this one so much more enjoyable. I was so much more immersed in the world. I love seeing more of Emily and Wendell. This is them making a map of the other land. So in this book, we are trying to find Wendell's home, and I don't know, the magic in this was magicking. I loved it. Coming in at number 6, we have another Carly Fortune book, and that is This Summer Will Be Different. This book takes place on PEI, so I loved it for that reason. She did her research. It felt like I was home. I felt like it was a very believable summer romance on Prince Edward Island. We have a woman, she heads to PEI, she is waiting for her friend, her friend's late, she meets this handsome guy at a bar, they sleep together, and then she realizes after the fact that she broke the cardinal rule of her best friend, which was do not fall in love with my brother, and she had just slept with him and didn't know that that was her best friend's brother. So then they spend the next millions of years pretending that there's no connection between them, fighting it, and then we're gonna follow their romance in this, and I just loved it. The whole vibe of Carly Fortune's books are just it for me. Like, I'm not a romance girly. I don't really love romance, like straight romance, that much. I am here for a sapphic romance, but again, only some of them. There's something about Carly Fortune's book, like I don't know what she injects in these, but like there's some kind of drug in here, and it's, for me, I'm addicted. I know she has a 4th book coming out this summer, and I can't wait already. I'm dying. I did get an arc of this. Carly, if you want to send me an arc of your next book, I would appreciate it. Anyway, I was gonna get this signed by Carly in the summer because randomly she's a family friend of my wife's family. I don't know. She was at my mother-in-law's house, and I was like, oh, I should ask her to sign these, and I didn't. I regret it. Coming in at number 5, we have Listen for the Lie. This is one of the most cleverly crafted thrillers I've read in a while, and I think I really enjoyed it because it's multimedia. So we are reading interviews, reading podcast excerpts. I just really like the way that it was done. So basically we have a woman who believes that she murdered her best friend, and everyone else thinks that she did it too, but she has no memory of what happened, and a true crime podcast host decides that he wants to cover the story, and it turns out he doesn't think that she did it, and we're going to unravel the story. Number 4 is a book I got out from the library, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry, and this is my favorite romance that I read this year. I would be an Emily Henry fan, I think. I want to read more of her books this year in 2025. There was something about this, just the way that she wrote the characters, that I was so invested in them, and it made me want to own a bookshop as well. So these guys are kind of like work rivals in a way. They both work in publishing. She goes with her sister to a extremely small town, and her sister basically wants to relive the story of this really popular novel that's come out that's based in this extremely small town. Extremely small town. It's really, really small and small. And when she's there, she runs into her rival, this broody man, and their chemistry. was amazing. Number 3 is Broken by Daylight, and this was one of my most highly anticipated books of 2024, and it did not disappoint. This series is not going to be for everyone. It is not. It is not. It's reverse harem, which I don't even know why I picked it up the first time, but something about it was very intriguing to me. So it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but there are 4 beasts, kind of 5. There's 4 beasts and another prince. They're each a prince of a different realm. They've been cursed. It's Beauty and the Beast. You know where I'm going, except it's reverse harem. So she has a relationship with 4 of these princes, and it's very interesting. I love it. I love it. It's fairies, it's fae. I love all of their different like worlds, or not worlds, or like lands. I'm invested in this. It's also queer because there is multiple male-male relationships in this story as well. So it's kind of like a polyamorous situation, kind of. So like she's in a relationship with a bunch of these guys, and they're in a relationship with her, and some of them are in relationships with each other or other people. This was, I think, the 4th book in the series. I was waiting for it to come out. Did not disappoint. I'm already thirsty for the next one. And coming in at books 1 and 2, we have the Ever Queen and the Ever King. This is no surprise. This was my favorite book series that I read this year. It's a duology, kind of. We have Viking Fae and Sea Fae, and I found the magic system very, very interesting. We have like enemies to lovers. He kidnaps her. She is a princess. He is like the king of the rivals. It was great. Oh my gosh. It has made me actually start 2025 by reading the Broken Kingdoms series, which is the same universe. It's the books that came before that. You can read these books without it, like I did, but I wish that I actually started with the Broken Kingdom series, because I think I'm getting a lot more backstory into the characters from over here. But it was so good. Oh my gosh, I was invested in the romance. I loved the world building. I liked the Viking Fae aspect. I find that she is a very good writer. I can also really see her improvement in storytelling from the Broken Kingdoms, which is her first series. It's 9 books, to the series that she's writing now. Miss Thief came out, which is the 3rd book in this like Ever King, Ever Queen series. I said that it's a duology, even though it's not, because the love story of these 2 characters is just 2 books, and then we're moving on to other characters. The same thing happens in the Broken Kingdoms, where it's like 3, 3, 3, and we're done with those characters now. Oh my gosh, we're moving on to their friends. I loved this series, and I realize now that this is really long, so let's get on to my stats already, because we've already taken up a lot of your time. It is the start of a fresh year. Welcome to 2025. My bookshelves are chaotic. I feel like my life is chaotic right now. I am very late doing my reading wrap up, but here we are. We're doing it now. Chaos and all. Time for a reading wrap up, because it was a good reading year for me. Can't wait to share everything, and thanks to all of you that have joined along this year and spent the year with me. I made a presentation for you this year. Here we go. So welcome to my 2024 reading wrapped. I'm now realizing, are you going to be able to see this? I don't know. We're going to do our best. Okay, here we go. So how many books did I want to read this year? My goal was, you can't see this. You definitely, do I have to angle it like this? Okay, my goal was 100 books. I mean, 100 books is a lot of books, objectively. No matter who you are, reading 100 books in a year is crazy. I will say though, I feel like it is such a competition, and people think like to be a real reader, you need to be reading 70 books, 50 books, 100 books, 52 books, like 200 books. I see people reading hundreds and hundreds, and that is great for them. That's great for them. But if you read 1 book, if you read 2 books, if you read 10 books, 12 books, you want to read a book a month, you're still a reader, and I don't feel like you should put that down. But I also don't think that we should put down people that read crazy amounts of books either. I mean, one thing I like to say is, not my circus, not my monkeys. That has nothing to do with me. I am proud and happy with my goal and what I accomplished. We're about to dive into that. But it doesn't matter how many books you read in a year. As long as you're enjoying yourself, having a good time, good on ya. So how many books did I read in the year? We read 111. You guys can't see this. I feel like this isn't gonna work. Oh well, we're still gonna do it like this. 111. read 111 books. Very exciting. I can't believe I read that many books. It's so many more books I read last year. I think last year I read 74. 111? Crazy. And what genres did I read? I made a little pie chart for us. Look at that. Okay. Kind of all over the place. I read a lot of different things. I'm also shaking because I had coffee today for the first time in I think 10 days, and my body's like, what are we doing? I actually read a ton of holiday romances. Can we acknowledge that? That's wild. I really committed to the Christmas reads in December. The largest chunk of the pie at 26% is all of the thrillers that I read, which checks out. I used to be a thriller girly and exclusively read thrillers. It's all I read. It's all I wanted to read. And then in 2023, I decided to step into the realms of fantasy again. I read fantasy when I was younger, and I am back a fully committed fantasy girly. At 17% of the books I read were fantasy, but 15% of the books that I read were romantasy, which is a fantasy romance. I've learned that romantasy is like where it's at for me. A lot of the time, I will say though, the difference between fantasy and romantasy for me was, one, is there a romance plot? If there is, it's probably romantasy. I think I put all YA fantasies under just fantasy though, because they're children. I'm not really reading it for the romance plot there. That's why they're broken down. And I did read a lot of romance, 16%. That's a lot for a self-proclaimed not romance girly. 5% of the books I read were parenting books. I also realized that you can't see everything on here. 5% YA romance, 3% memoirs. I read 2% literary fiction, 1% self-help. I think that's just one singular self-help book, one horror book. Overall, I'm all over the place with that and I like it. I will say a goal of mine for next year, we're just gonna start talking goals already, I guess. I want to read more different things. I think specifically this exact second, I'm feeling like I want to read something totally different, and I'm probably going to be leaning into like some literary fiction maybe as my next pick. I think I want to read more of it. I find that literary fiction in general makes me think a lot more, and sometimes you want to think and sometimes you don't. I think we all know that. How did I read? So I always find this really interesting. I personally just like this breakdown because I like to keep track of how I am consuming my books. So if we look here, oh, why does it look like that? Here we go. Looks like that. So 45% of the books I read were physical books and 46% were ebooks. So pretty equal. I'm happy with that. I just want to know, you know, I think mostly because I like purchased a Kindle and I pay for Kindle Unlimited. Every book that I read is typically an ebook from Kindle Unlimited or on my Kobo from Libby. So I just want to make sure that I'm utilizing those services because I spent money to buy, I spent money to buy all the books on my shelves too. But I spent money to buy a Kindle and I'm paying money to have Kindle Unlimited every month. I want to make sure I'm using it. And then 8% was audiobooks. That's less than previous years. I feel like I'm listening to a lot less, but next year we'll see how that changes. Where did I get my books? Again, you guys can't even see those. Where did I get my books? I am disappointed at how little books came from the library. Honestly, I thought that I would have read a lot more library books this year. I didn't. 41% of my books did come from Kindle Unlimited, so I think that that subscription is indeed being used. I am very disappointed that 31% of the books I read were books that I purchased. I should have specified if I purchased it in 2024 or it was already on my shelf but I purchased it, because I really was trying to do like a minimal buying year for books because I have a huge TBR and I need to be reading it because there are so many good books on my bookshelf that I'm just not taking advantage of. Like they're just sitting there waiting for me to crack their spine and I'm not, honestly. So I wish I broke that down. I didn't. 4% of books were gifts, 12% were from the library. What is this little sliver that doesn't have a thing? Oh, 4% were borrowed. Those were all from my mother, I think. 5% were ARCs and 4% came from Audible. I no longer have an Audible subscription. I listen to all of my audiobooks from Libby from the library for free. Just a way to save money and it's great, but you do have to wait a long time for the books to come out from Libby. What was my average star rating of those 111 books? It was a whopping 3.3. 6. And if we want to look at the breakdown of what that looked like, I made a graph. So you can see it's a nice little bell curve, definitely skewed more towards the higher rating side. So I actually read a lot of really good books this year. A lot of 5, 4s, and 3 stars. 3 is just like a middle of the road book to me. I read very few bad books. I read 15 2-star books. Actually, that's a lot. That's a lot of not great books. I read 2 1-stars, 35 4 stars, and 23 5 stars. And if you're looking at these numbers at any point and like say a mat is not equaling 100 or in this like percent or 111 books, I don't rate every single thing I read. So fan fiction I don't read, right? And I don't think I specified, but there was some fan fiction in there and some of those little smaller slivers of the pie. Also some like memoirs or like self-help type books I feel weird rating, and I don't always rate them, so that's why there's some things missing. How many were queer? That's what we're all waiting for. How many queer books did I read this year? I really wanted to read more queer books. It was a huge goal of mine. I feel like I really want to read just more queer fiction as a queer person, and I'm happy to report I read 17. Whoa, whopping number. I am happy with that, but I want to read even more. Next year's goal, more than 17. And if you wanted to know what those books were, here, screenshot it. I cannot guarantee that these are all good. For me personally, they weren't all good, but that's okay. And they're all varying levels of queer. Some of them super queer, some of them just like subtly queer. But overall, that's what I read. Those are my 17 books. The longest book that I read actually got a dedicated vlog, and that is to House of Flames and Shadows by Sarah J. Maas, coming in at a whopping 835 pages. That is a long book. The shortest book I read was The Gift by Frida McFadden. Did not like this. 2-star read for me. It was at least only 47 pages to get through. It's actually a Christmas novella. Favorite book, just popping right up here. My favorite book of the year, I would say, was The Ever Queen and the Ever King. These are it's not really a duology because it's going to be part of a longer series, but these are the only 2 books following these love interests. What was my least favorite book? This was my least favorite book. I gave it 1 star. It is Tessa Bailey's Merry Ever After. It was the cringiest holiday romance I have ever even imagined reading. It was so spicy from the get-go, and in the cringiest, absolutely cringiest way. I wish I could like scrub it from my mind, honestly. My goals for this year, I want to read 50 books off of my physical TBR because it's long. I don't even know how big it is. It's overflowing. There are so many books on it. I need to get reading, and I need to stop buying new books or reading things off of Kindle Unlimited. I need to read the books I have. So 50 is my goal, and I want to read 100 books. So half of those are going to be books off of my physical TBR if everything goes to plan. And I want to read more queer books and more POC authors. And with that, my reading wrap-up is complete until next year. Actually, that's a lie because I do like a mid-year wrap-up of the first half of the year. So I think that this is the last half of the video because I think I shared my 24 favorite books of the year in the first, or maybe this is the opposite.